The cafeteria was buzzing with laughter and clinking glasses. The annual corporate holiday party was in full swing. Employees, managers, and even the CEO had gathered in the grand hall, dressed in their finest clothes, celebrating the end of a successful year. But away from the center of attention, in a faded uniform and scuffed shoes, stood Daniel Carter, the janitor. Daniel wasn't part of the party. He never was. While others toasted to bonuses and promotions, Daniel quietly emptied bins, wiped down tables, and made sure the floors gleamed under the sparkling lights. To most, he was invisible. The man who pushed the mop, the one who always had a gentle smile but rarely a voice in the crowd. What no one knew, not even the coworkers who occasionally exchanged a polite hello, was that Daniel's story was so much deeper than the uniform he wore. Daniel was a single father. His wife, Maria, had passed away 5 years earlier after a sudden illness, leaving him alone to raise their daughter, Lily. She was only 6 then, fragile and full of questions he didn't always know how to answer. Overnight, Daniel went from being half of a team to being someone who had to carry it all. To pay for rent, school supplies, and hospital bills still lingering from Maria's treatment, he took the janitorial job at Sterling Industries. Not glamorous, not well paid, but steady. It kept food on the table, and that was enough. Or so he thought. But what most people didn't realize about Daniel was that once upon a time, he wasn't just a janitor. Before his world turned upside down, Daniel had been a pianist. Not just a hobbyist, but a prodigy. As a young man, he had studied music passionately, spending hours each day at the keys, playing compositions that moved his teachers to tears. His dream was to perform on grand stages, to tell stories through music that words could never capture. But dreams, as life often teaches us, don't always survive the storms. When Maria got sick, Daniel sold his piano to cover the costs, and when she passed, his hands, once alive with melody, grew calloused from scrubbing floors instead of playing keys. That night at the party, the company had rented a sleek black grand piano for background entertainment. A hired musician had been playing holiday classics, filling the air with cheer. But during a break, when the pianist stepped away, a group of younger employees spotted Daniel walking by.
"Hey, Danny,"
one of them called, grinning mischievously. "Why don't you play something for us?" The group snickered. They didn't expect anything. To them it was a joke. The janitor sitting down at the grand piano, a man in a faded uniform with hands that smelled faintly of disinfectant, didn't look like someone who belonged behind ivory keys. Daniel froze. His first instinct was to shake his head and walk away. He had learned to avoid attention, to blend into the background. But then, from the corner of the room, he saw Lily. She had been invited by the kind receptionist, who knew how much Daniel hated leaving her alone at home during these late night shifts. Lily, now 11, stood by the dessert table, her eyes shining with curiosity. She had never heard her father play. She didn't even know he once could. And in that moment, something shifted inside him. He walked to the piano. The room grew quiet, at first from amusement, but soon from intrigue as Daniel sat down. His rough hands hovered uncertainly above the keys. He hadn't touched a piano in years. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and thought of Maria. He thought of nights when they would sit together, her hand resting gently on his shoulder as he played. He thought of Lily's laughter, of the life he once dreamed of. Then, without another thought, his fingers began to move. The first notes were soft, uncertain, like a man rediscovering a lost part of himself. But within seconds, the room changed. Conversations died down, glasses stopped clinking. The melody grew stronger, richer, telling a story of love, loss, and hope all at once. It wasn't just music. It was Daniel's life poured out in sound. Lily's eyes widened as she watched her father transform. For the first time, she saw not the janitor who worked late nights to care for her, but the artist he had once been. The employees who had joked fell silent, shame creeping into their faces as they realized this was no trick. By the time the piece reached its climax, tears streamed freely, not just from Lily's face, but from many in the audience. Even the CEO, a stern man rarely seen showing emotion, was dabbing at his eyes. The song ended with a soft, lingering chord that seemed to hang in the air, refusing to let go. And then came the silence. A silence so powerful that for a moment no one moved. Then, the entire hall erupted in applause. Standing ovations, cheers, people rushing to the piano as if they had just witnessed something unforgettable. But for Daniel, the most important moment was when Lily ran to him, threw her arms around his neck, and whispered, "Daddy, you're amazing. Why didn't you ever tell me?" Daniel hugged her tightly, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. The CEO approached him afterward. "Daniel," he said softly, "I had no idea. You don't belong behind a mop. You belong behind those keys. How would you feel about performing at our charity gala next month?" It wasn't just a kind gesture. That night marked a turning point. The video of Daniel's performance, recorded by an employee, spread quickly across social media. Strangers were moved by his story. A single dad, a janitor rediscovering his gift. Donations poured in for him and Lily. A local music school even offered Lily free lessons. Challenges still remained. Life didn't magically become perfect overnight. Bills were still there, responsibilities didn't vanish, and Daniel still worked shifts at the company. But for the first time in years, he wasn't invisible. He was seen, valued, and reminded of who he really was. More importantly, he had given Lily something money couldn't buy: pride in her father. And every night after that, even if he had only a few minutes before bedtime, Daniel would sit with Lily at an old donated piano, teaching her to play. The music returned to their home, filling it with hope instead of silence. Life teaches us that people are often more than what they seem. The janitor sweeping the floor may carry the soul of a musician. The quiet neighbor next door may have once been a hero. The cashier at the store may be a poet at heart. Never judge someone by their uniform or job title. Everyone has a story, a hidden talent, a quiet strength. And sometimes, all it takes is one chance, one moment, for that story to shine. What did this story make you feel? Have you ever discovered a hidden talent in someone you least expected? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and join our growing family here at Be Kind Always. Together, let's spread more kindness, one story at a time.